You drive by them on occasion. You see them in the distance, cold and still. You avoid them for some reason that you cannot explain. We all do. Abandoned buildings are haunting grave markers of what was once alive and bustling. We turn them into haunted houses from our gossip, into stone and brick boogeymen with our speculation. But we will not know what terrors lurk inside until we go in. So join me as we explore 5 abandoned buildings and allegedly true horror stories from within them. If you want your story narrated, share it with us at darkstories.org. Also, check my comment below for a link where you can help me put together a video on disturbing scenes from 90s TV shows that aren't primarily horror series. Now, don't get left behind. This is one urban exploration you do not want to get lost in. The Abandoned School, from Parker. Location, Ohio. It was 2 years ago, during the spring of my senior year in high school. I'd met my friend group thanks to the community college my school partnered with for dual enrollment courses. We all met in an art class and art club. There was Cal, my best friend who's only a year older than me, and is basically a beanpole full of anxiety, with pretty sick dyed hair. There's Bridget, our resident Urbex expert, a self-proclaimed witch, and all-around spooky human being. There's Lindsay, Bridget's sister, who was admittedly on the little larger side. We consider her the group's mom. There's also Brandon, who reminds me of Charles Manson, and Cantrell, who is often referred to as the baby, but is the nicest person you'll ever meet. How our little trip finally came into fruition was thanks to the art festival our club was having. We were hanging out during the setup, and everybody was talking about how there's nothing to do in Southeast Ohio, which is pretty true. We wanted to do something out of the ordinary, spice things up a bit. Bridget, who was almost uncharacteristically animated, told us about this abandoned school she found not too far away from where we all lived. I'd always wanted to go urban exploring, but a lot of the well-known spots were at the very least an hour and a half away, so I leapt at the chance to go to this school. If I went, that almost assuredly meant Cal would tag along. Lindsay had already gone with Bridget the first time, so she was in too. And Brandon loved a good scare, and with Cantrell always ready to go, we had our group. Everyone was in, and we decided to make the trip that weekend. We had to take 2 cars since our friend group was a little too large to take anywhere without a mystery machine. We met up at Bridget and Lindsay's house early that morning in order to coordinate. Going through a quick checklist to make sure we all had black clothes, bandanas to cover our faces in case of asbestos, flashlights, and a few emergency supplies such as pocket knives and first aid kits, we then split off into 2 cars and began the journey. As I didn't have any idea where I was going, and they didn't give me any GPS coordinates, I stayed as close to the other car as possible. We must have traveled only 30 minutes before we reached the place, which was absolutely desolate. It appeared to be a coal mining town. As the coal mining had been the thing that kept the business in the area booming, when the mine shut down, so did the town. Once we reached the school, I laughed. It was right next to a graveyard. However, the graveyard was small, and it had a parking space that was across from the school. Bridget parked there, and I parked next to her. We did notice a couple of other cars parked in the distance, but we made nothing of it, since it was just off a main stretch of road into the town. We climbed out of our cars, ensuring again that we all had our equipment, and began to make a game plan for entering the school. There wasn't really a direct path to the entrance, as there were these large metal shipping boxes and broken pieces of wood clustered around the doorway. The door itself was also lying on the ground outside, as if it had been ripped off. The door being open was inviting enough for us. We were able to climb through the various pieces of wood, managing to shuffle some of them out of the way just to make the path that much easier to traverse. Upon stepping into the school, it felt like we were in a different dimension. Bridget and Lindsay were the first to enter since they were the most familiar and were going to give us the grand tour. I insisted on staying in the middle, squeezing the life out of Cal's hand as we followed the sisters in, with the other three in close quarters behind us. Where the light hit versus where the never-ending darkness of the building began, it sent a shiver through my spine. As a group, we all took a collective pause to take it in, then moved out of the open doorway so as not to be seen. Then we turned on the flashlights. The building itself was an old elementary school. It had been shut down sometime during the recession and was in relatively good condition, all things considered. Bridget led us up the stairs, softly saying, "Be careful. Once you get to the landing, it's a little weak on the left side." Heeding her words, we all clung to the right wall as we approached the top of the stairs. Momentarily, I released my grip from Cal's hand, and we began our way into the hallway of the second floor of the school. It was maybe half the size of the first hallway, and one of the classroom doors was open, light streaming in from the window. We all began to feel a bit more comfortable here. We were joking around and exploring the room, since there were a lot of things still left behind. One of the things I actually ended up picking up was an old AOL disc for dial-up internet, which sent us all into a small roar of laughter, as well as some small wall plaque about a soccer team or something. Our adventure continued on. We went down the hallway to peer into a science classroom, but could not enter due to a fragile floor. At the end of that hall, there was a small set of stairs that led up to a weird room that basically was being used as a storage unit for a bunch of creepy as hell Christmas decorations. You know, the kind that are basically blackface, but with the piercing blue eyes? Those. On the other side of that room, there were these sets of stairs that led down to the basement. Me, being an absolute coward, latched on to my friend again, and I was reluctant to follow the group into the basement of this building, but I did so anyway, not wanting to be alone. Now, when I say the basement was dark, it was very, very dark. The power on our flashlights was weak in comparison to the piercing darkness, and we only found them truly useful to see within 3 feet of us. The basement itself was huge. Once down the set of stairs in the back of the building, it opened up into this gigantic room that had a lot of empty space and rubble in the center. There appeared to be art on the walls. We found that it was definitely a little too dusty, so we donned on our protective gear. And then it happened. We began to hear the noises coming from behind us in the direction we had come from. The next 5 minutes of my life I remember in horrific, vivid technicolor. "Did you guys hear that?" Lindsay mumbled under her breath, shining her light in the direction of the sound. My head snapped too. Lindsay pointed her flashlight while the others shushed each other, trying to get a better listen. It was someone behind us. Then it sounded like footsteps, the rubble making some crunching sounds. Our group had managed to make it to the opposite end of the room before we heard the footsteps behind us, so it must have been a good 100 feet away from us, which meant we could not see them with our terrible quality flashlights. The air became thick and heavy as we all considered what we should do, as we continued to hear the footsteps in the rubble draw closer. Someone, I'm not sure who, with a quivering but firm voice said, "We need to go, guys." And so we all bolted. On the side of the room that we were on, there was another door that led into a hallway that we managed to see was coated with holes. Bullet holes. In fact, The glass on the windows and the wood in the doors were covered in these holes. And then we saw these red stains in the wall. Stains that we could only assume were blood. I don't know, I couldn't really tell. We were all running and I was in a panic. We ran up the set of stairs that led us back into the main hallway from which we entered. We shoved an old teacher's desk that sat in the hallway down the stairs. Just as we escaped, we heard something toss that desk to the side as someone began to dive and tear through the metal boxes and various piles of wood to come after us. I bit down on my bandana, attempting to keep absolutely silent. I could hear them speak. "Where are you?" I then watched the figure walk off into the nearby graveyard. Bridget saw it too, saying that she watched the man walk through the graveyard, checking the headstones and checking in the trees that sat there, before vanishing in the distance. Now we have a few theories of what could have happened. Our Scooby Gang has mused over the possibilities of what we saw. Our part of the country is well known for drugs. It's a huge problem, but it's really common here, so it wouldn't surprise me if we stumbled upon something illegal. Theory 2 is that Ohio has the largest rate of serial killers, so that would explain the bullet holes and blood. Theory 3 would be that we saw something paranormal. That would explain why we didn't see him coming in, and maybe that explains why he walked off into the graveyard. Regardless of who it was or why they were there, I'm just glad we did not end up as victims. I don't think we'll be going back to that school anytime soon. Don't go into the green room. From TennesseeTea. Location: El Paso, Texas. El Paso is regarded as a haunted city, with ghosts all over the older areas of it. So my friends and I were all but surprised when our encounter happened. It was around 2006 to 2007. Me, along with my friends Mike, Bill, and Alvin, had my bachelor party the night before. I was 18 and under the legal drinking age in the US, so we spent the night doing airsoft, playing video games, and the typical teenager stuff. As the night progressed, we got onto the subject of an unfinished neighborhood nearby. The next morning, we decided to go explore the location. We had some time to kill after all, as our tuxes were at the venue and the wedding was in the evening. We all jumped into my hatchback and I drove over. We were armed with airsoft guns, as well as that feeling of invincibility that youth have. The area we went to was quiet and barren. There were only 2 buildings, and the rest of the neighborhood was just empty lots or paved foundations. One house was fenced off pretty heavily, and appeared to have something like an antenna on the roof. We all left that one alone. I parked out in front of the other building. It looked like your typical abandoned house. Windows boarded up, the doors locked. After a few minutes of investigating, we found that the door that led into the garage was broken open, so we went in. As we walked in, there was the normal graffiti and vandalism, but then something caught our eyes. Written in big, bold black letters was, "Don't go into the green room." We laughed and joked about how spooky it looked and sounded. Then we went into the main house. The garage directly led into an area that was supposed to be a kitchen, but the cabinets had been torn off, and again there was graffiti everywhere. The adjoining area was just as disheveled. It was a large open living room with holes in the walls, a makeshift fire pit in the middle of the room, and beer bottles everywhere. Along one of the walls was a staircase. Above the stairs was the same warning about the green room, and there was something scrawled in marker below it. "You will die in the green room," it said. My friends again joked about and mocked the warning, saying that we could just scare anything off with our airsoft stuff. We went up the stairs. There was half a wall to our right that overlooked the living room, and there were a few doorways on the left. We went into the first one. Scrawled on the wall in red was, "This is the green room." "Nice," I said. My friends and I again laughed and joked for a few seconds, before quieting down and getting ready to move to the next room. But that moment of silence was cut by a strange whispering. It slowly built and built up until a loud thud. We all began to panic and run down the stairs and out of the garage. As we ran, something sounded like it slammed into the garage door. We did not look back and jumped into my car, speeding away. All the while, there was a strange feeling in the air, but we tried to ignore it. As we sped to the venue for the wedding, we tried to eliminate the awkward and terrifying silence with some jokes. Will said that we just stumbled upon two rats in the wall hiding a body or something like that. Nothing more strange happened until later that evening. We had already put the day's adventure to the back of our minds by then. After the wedding, the four of us were walking to the hotel rooms that the venue had added to the package for the groomsmen. I was saying my goodbyes before starting my honeymoon. Suddenly, Alvin fell and threw his MP3 player over the ledge by accident. At first, we thought he had just tripped, until we realized he was having a seizure. We called 911, and he was quickly hospitalized at Beaumont Army Medical Center. I continued on my honeymoon, and after my return, I found out he was still in the hospital. He was suffering from constant seizures. When I visited him, he asked me what had happened to his MP3 player, and I told him he had thrown it. It was then that he revealed that he did not really remember anything after the green room, and that the tests the doctors had done on him did not show anything that would cause seizures. I decided the following day to visit that house again alone. I drove up. It looked the same as we had left it, but my nerves were still shaky after last time. I didn't even make it inside before I saw something on the garage door, and it had me sprinting back to my car, speeding away from that area. There on the garage door was a human handprint. It descended out about an inch from the aluminum panel, as if trying to grasp something. I was beginning to believe that something had followed us, that something had attached itself to Alvin. Luckily, on a happier note, after about 2 weeks in the hospital, the seizures finally stopped, and Alvin was released with a clean bill of health. The doctors still don't know why it happened. If I had any advice to give, it would be to not ignore warnings, even if they're scrawled in graffiti. Skinwalker of Lee Acres, from Tommey. Location: Farmington, New Mexico. I live in a small town right next to a Navajo reservation. It's actually near the area where they filmed Skinwalker Canyon on Ghost Adventures. The story I'm going to share with you happened in the summer of 2014. It's about what I believe to be a skinwalker. One night, my friends Robert, Angelina, Richard, and I snuck out. All four of us left to our other friend's house at about 2 a.m. It was a normal night, and the insects were louder than ever, crickets chirping and shooting stars in the sky. We went to our friend's window, where our friends Ryan and Laurel met us. Then we left, trekking back to our own neighborhood. Angelina, being quite the girly girl, needed internet, so we stopped outside one of the other friends' houses for Wi-Fi. It was about 2 a.m. by then, so we sat near the road for a moment. Then we continued on for a short bit before stopping again at the abandoned junkyard, which was basically an unsupervised trash heap. We usually came here to smoke weed. There were these two big storage containers there. One was locked with a giant chain and lock, and the other was wide open. We chose to hunker down in there to smoke, being that it was the closest to the exit. We caught up with one another, talked about some rumors, and joked around. Suddenly, Robert screamed. "Did you see that? It just crawled across the road." I looked out from the storage container to see that it was dark and nothing else. But Robert insisted and pointed. I looked closer, and then I saw it. It was crouched down, and it almost looked like a person, but not quite. It had crawled back onto the dirt road, its deep-set eyes yellow. The body seemed to glow in the moonlight. It began to crawl in our direction before, bam, it just stopped. I think it saw us. Then it began to back up slowly before going full speed and disappearing into the field next to the junkyard. My mouth was wide open. We investigated the area, only to find a horrid stench. It made me gag. Richard joked, saying that we were going to find someone's body. We began to look around in the field, and soon stumbled across a bunch of dead chickens. It freaked us out for a moment. But what really creeped us out after that was the fact that the insects had completely gone silent. We decided to go back home then and there. To this very day, I have no idea what we saw, but I know that I'd rather avoid it if possible. The Haunting of Crosbie Towers, from Michael M. Location: Troon, Scotland. We should have been studying for exams, but we instead spent our May study leave holiday doing something even better. There's a large Italianate-style villa down the seaside in my town of Troon, Scotland. It originally belonged to a whiskey merchant, and was then a care home and then the property of the Church of Scotland. It's known as Crosbie Towers, Crosbie meaning dwelling by the cross. But there's nothing godly about that place. A couple of local newspapers, the Troon Times and the Air Advertiser, reported on what we experienced there, and the article can even be found online, as well as a more general history behind the house. In May 2012, some friends and I ventured in during late evening. The house was abandoned then. At the back of it, one of the wooden boards could be shifted, revealing an entrance that was once a door. It was a dusty, narrow passageway which led into the main ground floor lobby of the house, with rooms coming off on all sides. There was a sign there that read, "Warning, CCTV." But we knew it was just a ploy, so we went on. We were pensive after going in through the back door. The interior of the house was quite dark. We milled around for a while, joking and talking and egging each other on to go in beyond the passageway. I was at the back, but I still heard that incredibly loud, unforgettable bang come from upstairs as we entered the main part of the ground floor for the very first time. It sounded like it came from the top of the staircase, just as one of us approached the bottom. I can even hear it clearly in my head today. Needless to say, we ran out. The next time we went, we were at the back entrance again, and I was overwhelmed with this indescribable feeling that something was going to happen. Then I heard, or thought I heard, a piercing female cry. I ran terrified into the backyard, convincing myself that the cry was real, but to my dismay, nobody else heard it. Maybe it was just my fear. Maybe it was inside my head, but it sounded so vivid. Eventually, we did muster up enough courage to go in again, exploring the whole of the ground floor. It was pretty ruined and littered with debris, but the old carpets were still in place. It smelled musty like an old library. There was a broken down elevator, side passageways, and, to our horror, a dentist's chair. It honest to God looked like a torture chamber. Above the second floor, there was also a spiral staircase leading to the tower. We never made it up there. We were too scared. We joked what our feelings would be if we reached the tower only to hear unexplained noises down below. Would we have the courage to go back down? Or would we jump our way out? That was a terrifying thought. A year later, as we were walking along the seafront road that passes Crosbie Towers, there were noises coming from the house like taps on a window or wall. This was a calm spring evening, so it wasn't wind. We turned and looked at each other. Then we turned back to the house and the taps resumed, almost like it was trying to get our attention. We repeated this process to make sure, and the same thing happened. It was definitely creepy. That building was renovated around 2015 and is now a block of apartments. I have no idea who lives there now, but God help them. What I experienced there, it'll always be my reference point when I discuss the paranormal. Photos and stories from other people can only take you so far. You have to have your own experiences. You are the master of what you've seen and know, and this is my truth. People abandon things all the time. They abandon their own children when they're incapable or unready to follow through with the act of procreation. They abandon their projects when the hard work and endless hours hit home. They abandon their dreams when they seem to be so far off in the distance. When it comes to places and buildings, we abandon those for all sorts of reasons. Debt, safety, even the unexplained. So the next time you start thinking it would be fun to explore that abandoned house, remind yourself that there is a reason why people ran away from it. Good night. If you enjoyed this episode of Darkness Prevails, be sure to like, share, comment, and subscribe. If you have a story of your own and you want it narrated, share it with us at darkstories.org. If you want to help us put together videos, check out the forum topics at darkstories.org. If you want to support the show, go to patreon.com/darknessprevails to donate, or go to teespring.com/stores/darknessprevails and browse our merchandise. Now, as usual, here are my 5 favorite early comments from the previous video about 5 real humanoid encounters. Cortez Castillo says, "Me in the kitchen at 3 a.m. Psh, noob. I stay up till 6 in the morning and wake up at 6:15. Those 15 minutes do me quite well." Kylie Brenton says, "Hi Darkness, what is your favorite horror movie?" John Carpenter's The Thing, always and forever. It has everything. It is intelligent, it is rewatchable, and it has the best horror effects I've ever seen that are timeless. When something beats that movie on my list, I'm going to be in heaven. Sir Lucas says, "Does my ex-girlfriend count? In that case, I've got loads of encounters. I don't know what's scarier, that you've dated a monster, or the fact that you may have interbred with this inhuman monster." Lucas, no. CJ Vid says, "Luckily it's only 5:30 here, so I won't have to watch this at midnight." Aw, CJ, you just barely escaped the spooks. I might have to release this one late then. We'll see. Well, that brings us to the end of this Darkness Prevails episode. But don't you worry, more scary stories are on the way soon, so stay tuned. Until next time, here are the credits to my amazing patrons who continue to donate. They're great people. Remember, stay safe out there and stay creepy, because this world is a strange one.